Welcome. My name is Heath Gascoigne, and I'm the host of the Business Transformation Podcast. And this is the show for business transformators who are part business strategists, part business designers, part collaborators, and part negotiators. Business transformators have moved past just design and includes oversight of implementation of those business designs and business transformation, and includes stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation and work to ensure that it is aligned to the business design and technology, then you're probably a business transformator. This is a show where we speak to industry experts and professionals to share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you start, turn around, and grow your business transformation. Today, we are speaking to one of these industry experts. Natanya Wachtel is the founding partner of the New Solutions Network, which includes the New Solutions Factory, and Chief Community Officer at the Evermore. Natanya has served as a board member on the Women's Who Create. Natanya's diverse expertise, innate talent, and prolific accomplishments are a powerful trifecta poised distinctly between the unexpected intersection of marketing, tech, and mental wellness. Natanya is an award-winning revenue-focused B2B2C marketing and branding specialist, well-versed in new and emerging digital platforms, and with extensive experience of many of the biggest brands in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and tech. She has an academic and clinical background in behavioral psychology and is a certified life coach, business board certified health and wellness coach, and neuro-linguistic programming (NLP) master practitioner. Her passion lies on mentoring young people, womenwhocreate.org, girls.inc, build.org, and coaching people to discover and unleash their exceptional potential. As a practiced social community builder, Natanya's approach is inclusive, deeply researched, and creatively scientific, reaching and activating audiences from Gen Z to C-suite in 8 languages. A veteran entrepreneur, accomplished speaker, and former journalist, Natanya's work appears prolifically across renowned publications and industry events. Natanya, whoa, that is some background. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, that's an impressive resume there. You must be the most accomplished guest that we've had on the show so far, I can tell you. Okay, so we could talk about a lot of different things in terms of transformation, but with your background, let's focus on a few things. Mental health, and I see you have a particular interest in the younger generation, Generation Z. So we'll keep the agenda confined because that's a very big topic. It's a big demographic. So those that didn't know, it is the size of it, just a little bit smaller than well, it is in terms of USA anyway. It's the same size population, 70 million for the baby boomers and 65 or 68 million in Generation Z. So this is about the same size. So if the world thinks about Generation Z as a small population, that's like, no, it's a size of the baby boomers, particularly in the US. Now, so on our topic, we are going to be focused on Generation Z in terms of healthcare. Is there currently mental health rather? Is there a problem with Generation Z in mental health? Why is there a problem? And there is a particular issue that I wasn't currently aware of. That this is if I understand correctly, Generation Z is the generation that grew up in technology and really only knows technology. They didn't grow up in the days of fax machine or analog telephone. They are always got technology in their face. So I think in terms of, I can see the mental, thinking out loud, the mental impact that would have of kids growing up these days and seeing Instagram, the highlight reel, and they're seeing, oh my goodness, life is like this all the time. It's lovely, and therefore I must also have a lovely life. And if I don't, I might be in no value or a loser maybe, and the psychological impact of that, and if it's not treated, it can be out of control. So is there a problem? Why is there a problem? And then what are we doing about it? Which is kind of the 3 questions that I ask when I go do a transformation myself. So
Okay.
Natanya,
All
whoa,
right.
welcome.
Thank you. So there's a lot there. So Gen Z, which depending on where you look, is either 1995 or 1997 birth year to 2010 or 2012. So approximately. What you'll also notice is the volume and size is similar to baby boomers, but it's half of the amount of years. So it's a huge group in a short amount of time.
So it's like 10
And they
years
are,
versus 20
yeah, 10 to
years.
12 versus 20. Yeah. And they're growing up in a time of again, it might seem cliched, but legitimately measured increase in anxiety and depression. In fact, some research currently we were just speaking about 20% of their peers actually say they don't have anxiety or depression, or that it's not a significant factor, versus boomers who only 20% do. So boomers, 70% of boomers, or 30%, excuse me, about 70% say that things are great. And only about 20% of Gen Z does.
Wow.
So they're actually, unfortunately, nicknamed the most depressed generation.
Oh, that's
They're
a
more
shame.
likely than their peers to seek out mental health, though, which is great. Um, so like almost 35 to 40% of them actually do seek out mental health and are more open to talking about getting support about mental health issues. And more of them have actually worked with a clinician or mental health professional. But they have school shootings, they have debt, and they grew up into a crash and joblessness and a lot of political strife. That was their early days
So
of
that
kind of high
the end
intensity.
of the
Yeah.
last decade, um, yeah. So I think 1997 was about was it a stock market crash around then? I think I left.
Yeah, there was late 90s, early 2000s, so they're very early time, and then 2009, 10, 11 was another big dip here in the States. Yeah, so it affected, their parents, and which obviously affected them.
So what that mean for
And
them that they would be in a time where they would be more, what's the word, tighter with their money because they've seen tight times. So they,
Yes, they're more frugal in general than the sort of cliched role archetype of the millennial, that we talk about avocado toast and that kind of thing. That's not for Gen Z. Gen Z is much more spendthrift. In fact, thrifting, thrift shop clothing,
oh,
recycling, reusing. That they're very much more connected about making do with what you have,
wow.
which is great. Also, we are talking about younger folks from 13 to 15 to mid to early to mid 20s. So a lot of them haven't even entered the workforce, although there are many in the workforce right now, but they haven't necessarily fully earned their potential yet. So we're not 100% on the spending, but even comparable rates of early 20s in Gen Z compared to millennials or Gen X, they are more spendthrift. But really, it's tech. We think tech is playing a big role in everything. They're growing up hyper connected, and this can get really intense, evoke real consuming feelings of isolation and loneliness. So they're surrounded by everyone and no one. They're an island. And then also having the COVID and being not in school at very pivotal formative times, like first year of high school, or your first year of university if you're going, or your first year in your job. So they basically have this kind of drumbeat of negative news stories surrounding them. Then they have this FOMO, this fear of missing out, because everyone's highlighting what? I'm on a mountain and I'm over here and I'm doing this. And so there's FOMO, they're missing out. And then there's this sort of shame and falling short of this ideal because of this curated media that everybody is essentially their own publicist from the time they're
They're a
7
celebrity.
or 8 years old.
Everyone's a
Yeah.
celebrity now.
Yeah, and the Wall Street Journal and other publications are now starting to report about the impact of Instagram. Maybe I'm not supposed to name. I'll say
Yeah,
social
yeah.
platforms on the mental health of teenagers. A lot of it is this comparison, and it's not just for young women, but that is a big area. But this is for all kinds of folks. Um, People with emerging sexual identity issues and definition. There's more acceptance in some ways, but there's also more polarizing, things, as you can see in the news and even in our government about these kinds of things. So body image, suicide, anxiety, depression, feeling less than, school shootings. This is sort of normal conversation for these young people.
Whoa.
And the suicide rate, unfortunately, is up about 30% right now in this age group
Wow. So
compared to.
as a demo, they got a lot of. I wasn't aware of. Well, what I would be. I think I'm a Generation X. Um, and now I wasn't aware of all these potential issues that the technology would be an issue or cause an issue. But I can, when you step back, like go into a client and you go, you step back and you look at the big picture, what's going on, you go, okay, yes, I can see that if they're bombarded with all this, I don't know, it's like if it let's pick on without saying any names, Instagram, the highlight reel of everyone's life, and it's all the very, very best. Of course, it looks amazing, but the reality is, it doesn't always like that. This is the highlight reel. But if kids don't have the maybe training or the ability to step back and see it and go, oh, does that happen all the time? Then they might be led to believe that this is reality, and they must also achieve the same outcomes or same results and live a great life like they do. And if they don't, then there's something wrong with them.
Right. And then, and then the pandemic comes, which has affected all of us in different ways, some more than others. And, you know, it destabilized economies. Their whole education often was interrupted, as well as their social life. But even, there was a lot of loss of life, and a lot of older siblings had to step up and essentially parent their younger siblings while they're stuck home together. Become caregivers, become teachers. I mean, and they're young themselves. Um, the depression rates is up, anywhere from 20 to 40%, depending on where you look. The Lancet, studies across the globe. But it's pretty intense. And then, you know, a lot of them were entering the workforce at the first time at this time too. It's a very tough time, as you know. There's a lot of job loss or lack, even though there's a lot of talks about the openings in jobs. There's also a lot of job loss, especially for some of those early career jobs and minimum wage jobs, and jobs that were just their source of income to get by, especially if you're a young student.
So these would be probably then the most educated, because I think that maybe the education now has got better over the years. But there'd also would be maybe their earning potential, although they haven't reached their potential because they're like maximum of 25 years old. Their potential, maybe from an investor's perspective, they look at this population and say, "Wow, this is the next version of the baby boomers," and they're about to hit their earning potential when they leave university, more educated, more opportunity, all the technology in the world, the most technology in the world right now. So there'll be a few eyes looking at them, but they have this inherent, unfortunately, um, uh, issue mental health wise that is, what do you say, underserviced or under-recognized?
Yes, I think it's starting to be recognized, but it's definitely underserviced. And we were talking about this before we recorded, and I think it's worth mentioning, I hope, that it's one thing to recognize the issue. It's another thing to come to help address it with the old tools. And that's the problem. So the underserved comes from part of the fact that because they're tech natives, the way they speak to each other, the way they speak to adults, the way they feel about therapy, yes, they might be more open to it, but they also have a different sense of self, a sense of what they want to be and who they want to be, and how they get there is completely different than the way it was defined 30, 40, or 50 years ago, which is still how traditional, talk therapy is set up. Surveys, self-assessments, the way things are written in a scale, how are you feeling about this today? It's all written in a way that doesn't connect very well. Also, the isolation, we know there's a rise in telehealth and telemedicine, so talk therapy, maybe access is a huge challenge, right? Therapists are just overwhelmed. They cannot see all the patients that they
Oh,
want.
wow.
Their appointments are months out, even with telehealth. And then it's still an arbitrary moment in time. So, one of the reasons we started focusing and looking at how do we better serve this generation from a mental health perspective, resilience, self efficacy, grit, determination, because we need them. They're the future, right? And we need to help them in the way that's
Absolutely.
going to work for them. So, one of the things we're trying to do is kind of turn old school therapy on its head and really look at engagement and building the hero's journey and building up each one of these young people to be the best them, whatever, however they define that they can be. And a lot of that has to do with those things around mastery and resilience and grit to push through the noise and the clutter and the negative loop spiral that they're basically being exposed to every time they open their phone, which they have to not just open their phone for socialization. Now school is on the phone, work is on the phone, everything's on the phone. I say on the phone, any tech, tablet, what
Yeah,
have you.
any mobile device, and handheld mobile device. So to address this problem, there's like when I go in and my team will go into a transformation, there's but not say particular process, but there's a usual steps or stages that you go through. Is there a particular process to address this? We've got to do it in a certain order, because it sounds like if the messaging is wrong, you're off from the start. So
Right, right. I don't know if there's one size. I know that we're exploring, AI tools. We it also spoken about, that older generations, the things that are out there in the commercial marketplace today, there's a lot of bot driven sort of therapy apps, and that those work pretty well for older folks because they're not necessarily expecting and used to a level of engagement and personalization that the younger generation is sort of table stakes, right? So
So
you
they
you have
like
to
the
kind of
better
evolve.
engagement, the customization.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
they're going to expect more personalized experience because they're going to expect that from any brand that they engage with, right? Not even not mental health, any brand, and they're less brand loyal about brand name and more about customer centricity. So that applies across all businesses, right? In mental health, you have to have, a few things. It has to have credibility, of course, and it has to have engagement. So basically therapy can be boring and also be even perceived as slow in terms of affecting change because it often can take months and months and months, and some of them say, I had to meet with 6 therapists before I found someone that I can connect with. So what we're trying to do is sort of support and respect the therapeutic communities and the clinicians and the job that they have to do, which is big and difficult, but also supplement all this time that these young people are waiting to deal with their traumas and their situation. So we have to, be a little creative in that way. At least, that's what my groups are working to do with using game theory, making apps that have adventure, a call to adventure within them. And so that the idea of traditional therapy kind of goes to the background, and the idea of going on a quest to better yourself is kind of more in the foreground, and using that kind of language instead of how do you feel today on a scale of 1 to 5.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a kind of a different way of defining and addressing the starting point.
So would it be that scale of 1 to 5 almost like condescending? That's not really empowering. Um, so you're flipping it, the messaging around, although the maybe the outcome is still the same, but the way that you do it, let's say it's a user journey. I don't know if you call it that way, or user experience. That the user experience is, in your words, was it customer centric? Um, so more understanding of the customer to start with.
So, but basically, the other thing is that the way people defined themselves just a few generations ago were really bound by often two or three attributes. Your career, I am a stockbroker. I am a school teacher. By your ethnicity, by your gender, these were the labels, right? I go to church, or I go to synagogue, or I, go here, and that's like one of my identities. And I'm a parent, and I'm, a clinician. Whatever that is, you had three or four things that like defined you, and because of those, there were societal norms that you kind of said, okay, I fit here or I fit here. Well, nowadays, all of that is blown up. And in any given day, any one young person has like seven personas that they manage. They have the persona that they want to curate and be for their high school, let's just say, in their classes with their teachers. But then let's say they're a president of this club and that club, and then they have a different sort of persona. And then, after school, they're into some group where they do fashion, and then they have that persona. And so there's all these different identities that they say they're sort of wrestling and stitching together in a fabric that aren't tethered. And so there's a beautiful thing in terms of that they are defining themselves. They are the most varied in terms of how they describe themselves, where they align, being aware of some of their mental health issues and naming them. At the same time, it's so many kinds of things, it's very easy to feel other. And that's a challenge when you feel other, like you said, you can feel less than. So not only fear of missing out on an event or a party or a movement, but also on your self-worth of like, I belong here. Where do I belong? I'm not one thing. And that's another, area that you have to navigate a little bit differently, whether you're a consumer commercial brand appealing to them, for brand loyalty and acquisition of a product, or to engage with them on a journey like a mental health journey.
Are they you mentioned brand loyalty there? Would they be loyal to a brand, or they're a brand agnostic?
Unlike generations before, more brand agnostic in terms of like the label, and more about quite frankly, a lot more close to what a brand stands for in terms of their commitment on cultural, socio-political issues. Those things come to the forefront. They know about these things, and or their commitment to customers and or servicing different kinds of customers. So depending on where the young people are on the spectrum of their personal beliefs, they will look for brands that
Aligned to,
share those personal
yeah.
beliefs.
Well, that's a good tip there
And
for.
price may be completely, irrelevant. I mean, not completely irrelevant, but way less in the consideration set, at least in the sort of survey data.
Okay, so they're more concerned about the experience that they get, that it was tailored or customized to them, as opposed to, and not so irrespective of the price, price may be secondary, um, but as long as they got that, I think the most part would be personalized user experience.
Yeah, the relationship. So the relationship, how they're treated, and what does the company or that brand stand for? What do they
Wow.
stand behind? Again, I'm not saying pro or con any personal thing to stand for, and I'm not saying they're all activism in one side of the spectrum or the other, but generally they're bound to a brand that feels like it aligns to their values, which is very different. I feel like if you were asking a boomer about their investment portfolio 30 years ago, you couldn't tell me what the company culture was of the companies in that investment portfolio. But today, you'd have a young investor who would.
Oh well, that's a good tip for organizations that yeah, to look at their probably their values and their mission statement, and think about how they whether if they were targeting Gen Z, um, that they were targeting it in online with their message. I think a big part of the whole servicing that market would be making sure that that message is like, what do you say, if it's not on tune or fuzzy, then you're just gonna go straight over the head.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's sort of just platitudes and there's no real evidence, they will suss that out as well. So they will, these are the Wikipedia contributors, these are the researchers, these are the I'm going to connect the left hand to the right hand to see what's going on, and they want authenticity. And we've seen that with a lot of the activism involvement. It feels very much like kind of the beginning of the 70s again,
Yeah,
where young people are
going
getting
around.
involved and saying, I want to change the world, and they mean it. They don't have the money yet, but we also spoke about they are poised to inherit a lot of the world's wealth because they are the grandchildren of the wealthy. And those folks are getting sicker and passing on, sadly. And so they are going to be coming into inheritance as well as their early careers more educated, more qualified, and more able to probably negotiate and navigate better sort of employee benefits and that kind of thing because they're ready for it. They're sort of saying, I deserve to be treated like a human, so here's what that looks like. And it's a very, very different type of culture, lexicon, language, and expectation for interpersonal dynamics as well as financials.
Okay, that's just in case the listeners had missed that, is that or viewers, is that they are the grandchildren of the generation of the boomers, baby boomers, the baby boomers they've done well, acquired their wealth and are retiring or passing away and leaving them inheritance. So, and both they have effectively two sources of income, inheritance, but also their education, as they enter now the workforce with possibly inheritance, that they have a lot of spending power.
Yeah. I mean, the projections in the next decade are astronomical. And that's why, if you wait 10 years to pay attention to Gen Z, you're going to miss the boat. It's now.
Uh-huh. So you got to plant the seed now, to benefit from the growth in this market, both in their probably the population, but what they're saying, the baby boomers after the war, after the world wars, they come home, soldiers come home, and hence why there was a baby boom. So families married, husband and wife, family unit, children. Is that still the scenario then with the of this generation?
So again, I'm going to generalize a bit. So for you and the audience, forgive me here, but probably not a shock that traditional heterosexual marriage, as well as all other kinds of marriage, is generally down. And
So that's a population growth
also the number of
falling.
children, yes, the number of children and young people who have been surveyed about their plans. So we know this isn't necessarily an exact number because people don't always do exactly what they think they're going to do, of course. But just looking at cohort analogs from the same point in time. So meaning high school students in the 2000s, in the 2010s, I can say, the 90s that were surveyed. So same age points in time going forward, the number of young people who say they're going to have children is statistically doubling down in the negatives every year.
Oh,
So
wow.
less are saying, I plan to have children, I plan to be married, I plan to buy a house, all those kinds of numbers are consistently going down. So family looks different.
Whoa.
Friendsgiving that I think millennials coined, but things
What do
around
they call it?
this
Friendsgiving.
chosen family. Yeah, chosen family. Essentially people are coming together with other like-minded people and making partnerships and living arrangements and small, not commune, but community based situations kind of akin to that. That's why I was saying it feels like the 70s. It's a lot about collaboration, sharing resources, and it's amazing. And that's across all socioeconomic statuses and all ethnicities and all gender affiliations. Like it's really interesting. I mean, people are just saying, we like similar things, we have similar values, let's find a way to support each other. That doesn't mean no one's having any children, but it's definitely less focus on children, definitely a little bit later, and or fewer children, and less likely to be married.
Okay, so if they that's a bit of a concern that if the next generation is let's say not interested in what's the word procreate procreate we
Procreating,
yeah
yeah.
procreating so if that generation is not looking forward to having children, then there's a population decline overall. Yeah, that's a bit of a concern. And if they are featuring, how do they feature in terms of stats and mental health compared to the others? Suicide, depression, hospital admittance for um, self harm, those kind of things. Is it a big number? Should we be concerned?
Yeah, so it's pretty bad. I mean, it's doubling. It's up there. Now again, you have a little bias around the fact that now there's a name. People put a name to their feelings in a way that boomers didn't as much, right? So you're going to have more incidents anyway, just like other things like ADHD and autism spectrum disorders and things that are now we have different tools to assess. Some of the increase is because of the fact that there are more tools to assess, right? So you can identify them. But also statistically significant increase just in incidence. So just to be careful, like I want to make sure everyone, I like to look at data from a couple of ways to make sure it tells the story in a way that really we don't infer things that aren't relevant. But yes, it's quite significant. And you can imagine if you don't have those social norms to kind of pull you in and out, even colloquially among friends, someone who gets really upset about something and then their friends like, okay, I know that really hurt your feelings, but they probably didn't mean this or that. You can kind of get nuance, you can get tone, you have live interactions, you can look at things from a few angles and not necessarily just the way that you perceive it in your head. When you, meaning anyone right now, if we were writing a text message back and forth to one another, a lot of the sentiment would be lost. And unless you really know the person, sometimes intent is not clear and discernible. So imagine all that doubt for most of your interactions in life. It's a very,
Wow.
very
Yeah.
heavy burden, and it's really tough to anchor your baseline. And that's, why, we're focusing on helping build up young people to look within themselves and get that strength and look to others and in an authentic way where there's trust and not a competition for who's the coolest all the time and make sort of, that be the cost of entry of social engagement. We're trying to kind of shift that whole dynamic. It's a big goal.
Oh, massive, yeah, massive goal. So you're starting off on, just to put it in context. So we're talking about Evermore, or we're talking about the New Solutions Network.
We're talking about Evermore for the most part. The New Solutions Network is a group of like-minded but very different skilled senior folks in industry and healthcare medtech who are looking to help the traditional um, stewards, if you will, of a lot of the, quite frankly, investment in patient consumer programs for wellness betterment or even better health. So the reality is that biotech and pharma brands, company manufacturers, and sometimes health insurance providers like payers, big health insurance companies, global and US only, they're the ones who fund a lot of the research and the work around betterment, around managing chronic diseases in terms of not just the therapy that you put in your mouth or in your arm or where, but also what you do with that in your daily life, your relationship with your clinicians, and all that. So because of that, and I come from in-house pharma career trajectory, really pushing for authentic support, not just check the box. We made a pretty ad
Yeah.
and we made a checklist in a box that had some keychains in it and a refill reminder program. Good luck with your diabetes, and now you have your pills. So, here's a postcard and a contest, and good luck with your depression. So really trying
Yeah.
to look
That
to
was the
those
old
groups.
school, was it? That's the old school method
Yeah,
of
I mean,
addressing
I worked on a
simplified.
lot of
Yeah.
those, yeah, brands, and really was desperate, quite frankly, begging for funding of like the promotions budget. Can I just have some of your pen money so I can like make a brochure to just explain this? Like it was so difficult in the early days in pharma to get anyone to care about patients. Now most pharma and biotech companies plaster all over LinkedIn, and their walls have painted mission and care about patients first, and that's wonderful. But sometimes when the rubber meets the road, there's still some work to be done, and I think that's a function of these big giant behemoth engines that are in place that you know a lot of that is set up to protect us all. Quite frankly, there's a lot of regulations and protections in place to do that, but sometimes the creativity gets lost within that, right? So the balance, and it's a difficult balance to strike, and I'm not saying there's an exact formula either, but the balance between doing something that actually helps, and for me it was about going to bed at night and feeling like I did something that mattered instead of just made a PowerPoint, um that actually gets in the hands of people who need it, and not just, okay, I signed a contract with a company that's going to help pay for medicines. I don't really know if it works or if people can do it, but I signed that, so I did the right thing. That's kind of how pharma has been hands off. And I don't mean that they don't care, but they're not involved in the actual customer experience. Very, very rarely. There's a lot of lack of visibility, so many layers. And quite frankly, nobody's being measured on that customer experience because the compounds that they were producing, that takes years and years of clinical trials and major investments, of course, and understandably, and clinicians and the data and the safety and the efficacy is where the focus was, and then of course the sales. But focusing on, okay, after all of that, somebody's taking your therapy, what else can you do to support them in a real way? That's still emerging.
So from that, say, big pharma's perspective, what you're just saying there is previously they would not listen to the customer, or maybe not listen, but their thinking
The
was
only customer to them was the physician. Yeah.
not the end user.
Yeah, that wouldn't even be called customer until pretty recently.
Oh wow. So how would that?
And physicians weren't seen as people either, by the way. They were seen as factories to write scripts. They
Oh
weren't
wow.
necessarily considered about their workflow or their practice needs or their challenges with certain guidelines or resources. So really looking at what is a customer for pharma and biotech, and with payer systems in a new way, and trying to bring that authenticity that we're talking about with Gen Z across, right? Do what you say you're going to do, imagine, right?
Whoa.
And try and do good. I mean, do more less harm than you've done good. And that's really like the balance. That's all we're
Wow.
trying to
So
push for. And it's difficult.
that's a fundamental shift or transformation of an industry there to change that thinking. What do they say? Profits before people. But now the switch to be people before profits.
Or at least at the same time. I think that they were saying it in the last 10 years. I don't see many
Doing it.
companies truly doing it. Right. And I understand why, because you need somebody passionate about it to pay attention all the way down to the level of button pushing. And that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, and in the change
But I
program.
do believe it's possible, and they have to maybe also think a little bit out of the box and look for different kinds of innovative partnerships, and maybe not control the relationship as much as they once wanted in terms of the dialogue, and be comfortable enough that if their solutions, whether that be a medicine, a device, a digital therapeutic, or an injectable, or any kind of therapy, whatever that is, or a pill or an infusion. Okay, that is, of course, the main thing they're focused on. But if you're saying you care about that customer, that patient, or that treater, the treating clinician or the healthcare team, you need to think about how their life works around that, and what they might also need that you could be uniquely poised to help with. And is it really valid, or did you make it so you're proud of it? So, meaning like making a lot of their own solutions may or may not be the way to go, and sharing the credit with an established company that has solutions that can actually affect change. So that's kind of, a shift.
Would that be in that case for like would say project delivery where you create a product that they would outsource it to a provider that has two things, maybe the ability or capability to develop and implement or deliver that service, but their values are aligned as well.
Yes, exactly. And they may or may not have a customer base that is outside of that manufacturer's purview. So, meaning, in mental health, in diabetes, in oncology, there's going to be multiple manufacturers with different solutions and products and therapies for different kinds of people. Some are going to be competitive, some are going to be complementary, and some are going to be just across, different segments, but they may all be serviced by a similar platform or community group. And that's, used to be the role of advocacy groups, mostly advocacy organizations that would help do that bridging. But I'm talking more about like services and tools, like, you know, like apps, um, things to help you in the rest of your life beyond your disease management.
You have a interesting app, don't you, for Evermore, something that is unique currently right now.
Yes, I mean, we think so. We do. We've
Without giving
tried.
too much away, though, if you don't want to.
No, I do. It's available in the App Store right now, and some of the things I can't give away are sort of who we're partnering with, but I'll say large payer systems. So people who provide insurance, private and Medicaid in the U.S. right now, so that people can access it and provide this. It's a mental wellness betterment app, but it's not supposed to feel like therapy, and it's for Gen Z, and it's really rooted in the thing that you said about in my introduction, sort of the interconnection of a couple things that we think are really important and powerful, which is sort of that intersection of tech, psychology, and young people, right? So it brings together the best of the best across the AI space, using AI with empathy built in, and that is a huge factor. In fact, it's part of the core foundation there, and focusing on the initial person inner journey. So we call it the hero's journey, and helping bolster and bring them up to be the best them that they can be. So it has a feeling of a spirit of adventure. There's game theory so that it's exciting, so that you want to do it. But ultimately, it's in complement. If the person has a therapist or they're on medication, it works in complement with what they're already doing, and helps you work through some of your issues, especially with the case rates as they are, with clinicians being, just backlogged for months. This is a in the moment, real time way to process how you're feeling about certain things for young people. And, pharma, it doesn't fit exactly well with the old pharma models, but some of the new companies are very interested in looking at how we partner such that they can offer something that actually is fun and exciting and useful, and still helps with, that mastery and self-efficacy and anxiety and depression lowering. But there's that's just one example for one market. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say the fun, exciting, and useful together. The Yeah, I've been onto projects where they have well, you think they'll be fun and exciting, or the changes they implement would be useful, but it ends up being just interesting. Yeah, that's a key word there, useful. Um, I've seen a lot of projects where they deliver things that are interesting but not useful, like you say the values. A company has espoused values, but versus espouse what they say they'd like to do versus enacted what actually happens in practice is a little bit separated.
Right, right, exactly. And so, here we're just trying to explore how we get the best of both worlds and have, respect and honor and, quite frankly, need these big players to help support so that we can put these kinds of tools in everyone's hand. We don't want cost to be a barrier, right? So that's another thing that we're dealing with, a big wealth disparity in the country. So getting access to care, and I don't just mean mental health, any kind of care, with our healthcare system, you must have heard of this quite a bit. It's very different. I know visiting the UK, I had some illness and I went with my mother-in-law in and I was coughing, and this was before COVID, and they took me right in and they treated me and they gave me all this medicine, and I just felt so confused, even though I have lived overseas, about what to do with all this extra time and lack of forms. I mean, I think I put my name on the form, and I was like, well, let's stop in the gift shop because I feel like I didn't spend any money and I came into a hospital. This Something's wrong. Like, I didn't know what to do with
You
myself.
didn't get a big bill. Yeah.
And so I went to it was like a charity shop. And then the same, I had medicine that I needed. They said, if you need, come back. I was seen right away. And it was so pleasant. And that's not really the experience here in the States for most people. And most folks, the care burden is quite a bit. So if we can get access, um, and that does have a cost, because at least for this app that we're working with, we are very private about that data, and so that has a cost to store privately, right? So if you have advertising, people don't always understand, like Facebook and Instagram, if I'm allowed to say their names, I think, the platforms that exist today that they use to communicate with, their data is there and used in different ways and sold to advertisers, and that's why they are free. So because we're not doing that, we need sponsors, and so we have to not, we can't disintermediate the clinicians, and we can't disrupt these large organizations that, quite frankly, are the reason we'll be able to do what we do.
If the product is for free, you are the product. You're providing them something. In most cases, it's the data. So maybe then, and particularly around health, then people would be hesitant to use a particular site, website, app, mobile device because of the potential reuse of their data. Then, there's the reluctancy, but you can, there's means and ways you could possibly get around that. Tell them it's secure and other things. But when it's backed by a health or medical or big pharma or bio or something related to life sciences, it, does that also create the same hesitancy?
No, I mean, I think there's sort of like popular opinion sentiment. And I will say that, having worked in house, and I like to think that I have integrity, I know that there are actually a lot of levers in place from regulatory perspective to keep health information private. And that's why we're trying to work with people who understand that. And hopefully people will respect and understand that, rather than, other tech companies whose data sharing is much less stringent, let's just say. Because nobody's going to trust it if they can't feel that their data is private. No one's going to speak their truth. This is what we're hoping for themselves, but we have to pay to store it and keep it private. So there is a monthly cost, and that's also why we need sponsorships to help provide access to those who can't, because it's in the consumer marketplace, who can't get access otherwise.
So in terms of your product, is it live right now? You're on the App Store, though, aren't you?
Yes, we are in the App Store, just very recently, and pretty exciting stuff happening there. But again, this is a startup, so we have a ways to go. But the adoption rate is uh, pretty impressive for us, and we're really excited. And we came through an incubator program, so we've had quite a few, in the tens of thousands of beta testers. We work with young people. I actually personally get to run the youth advisory, and it is so rewarding. I learn so much. Some people mentor because they like to feel really smart. I like to do it because it's a true natural high to, like, see
The feel good
somebody
factor.
realize something for the first time for themselves, master something, and want to share it with you. And even through Zoom, because we have to do a lot of it virtually now, but it's an incredible feeling. And these young people are so committed and so invested in understanding themselves and bettering others. And these are very different young people. Like, they don't have the same interests, they don't have the same affiliations, and yet there's this common thread. It was really amazing to me.
Wow. I do a little bit of mentoring myself, to younger generations, both professionally, as in they are young professionals, and then those that are still in high school. Um, I did a Big Brother program back in Australia, as part of a sponsored program from where I was working at the time. So I do quite enjoy that, but I didn't realize of um, the mental health issue. So that's very interesting. Um, yeah, if they are going to be the leading demographic, being the leaders, next leaders of the world, and they've got issues now, the generation after them is going to have even worse.
Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to use the resources that we have, the knowledge that we have, and meet them where they are. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And, like I said, on the sort of corporate side, new solutions, we're trying to work through our corporate partners and relationships to help bring awareness here and to work on things that help connect not just with Gen Z, that's across any kind of patient type, but even clinicians, just humans. Let's connect to humans and help humans do their jobs and treat diseases and fight and help all be better, right? Rising tide floats all the boats. That's a tough sell.
Wow, yeah, that's a great quote. That one,
Sadly.
right, yeah,
And
yeah,
sadly,
I will
and then
quote
for
you
the
on that.
we have a specific solution, that, worked. And so the founder of Evermore, is a former colleague of mine, an amazing woman named Ivy. And she was at, I think I'm allowed to say, PricewaterhouseCoopers. She was at a different job. Most of us, came in and just started to have that pull and that feeling of, can I do something to help heal the world? And that she answered that call, and the rest of us are joining her. We've taken arms because she's a pioneer in it, and she's passionate and she's dedicated, and I don't know when she sleeps. And
Oh,
we've
she's
been
on
really
it all the
lucky.
time.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And we've been really lucky to come on the journey, because the more I get involved, the more I know this is the thing that matters, and that's really hard to come from sort of a corporate background to kind of do that, and kind of do something that's a little risky, but I really believe it's worth it. And I think that, the conversations we get to have with these youth advisors, even down to the way they frame up things, they are so articulate. And sometimes I also see something that I think is unfortunate, where older generations dismiss them and their perspectives because of their youth, and because of this sort of, because of like the first level TikTok culture cliche around their not taking things seriously. And I've heard them say, like, listen, I've grown up with like war, political instability, school shootings, shooter drills, friends getting kicked out of their house because they're gay, like all these things. And he's like, and I'm like 15, sometimes we need brain cleaner, and that's why we like stupid stuff. And like, I kind of got it explained to me a little bit too, and that, like, they're not aware. It's that they need a little bit to tune out because it's so intense and so real. And they were thrust upon information that most of us didn't really even have exposure to until if we left home. I mean, you had to look up in an encyclopedia or maybe get a hand on a newspaper to even understand about what was going on in the world. Now the strife of the world is the headline news that before they barely open their eyes, they've already got it in their news feed.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, they got it, and almost bombarded non-stop. Can't turn it off. So with these projects and programs I go into, or we go into, I think, not say it separates us, but we go in there to build the capability so that the client can have the skill set and the training, the tools that they can do it themselves. So you talk about the coaches or the mentors. If they are the next generation coming through, is it also they are also maybe the next trainers themselves?
Yeah, I know that I have a little bit of a cringe personally, like when even you're doing my bio, because everybody's a coach now. And I know that. I know that
Yeah.
that's how it seems. And so I have like a mixed feeling about it myself, even being in the field. But a lot of that is that in order to get those certifications, at times you have to go through as you know, you have to go through a lot of these exercises, and I had to deconstruct my own self in the process, and I just truly felt it so liberating and so motivating towards actually doing affecting change, whatever you're into, that I wanted to share that deconstructing of the self and building it back up is okay, especially if you're in maybe a more rigid career track. And then for organizations to do without being pejorative or insulting or saying, hey, guess what, don't make money, just be altruistic, really functional around, like you said, workshopping and training, that understanding you can still have financial P&L goals met and actually connect with customers and do something of value. And imagine, right? So to work through how to move through systems, what kind of check boxes, if you will, or checklists or protocols or SOPs, whatever you want to call it, need to happen such that you're aware of where you're at with your customers across these different stages, versus just, this is our projected revenue and this is our actual sales and we did a good job, so customers love us, the end. And we're trying to turn over that apple cart, especially in the life sciences.
Okay, that's a I didn't. I think my personal maybe experience and with the projects that I'm involved in, that there is a little bit of maybe more so the customer journey or customer experience through their interaction with the organization. Um, Hopefully, that is a bit more widespread, not just my personal experience. Um, but if you're saying the question there about deconstructing yourself and rebuilding yourself is okay, is it because maybe the millennials see themselves as, the Gen X, Gen Y see themselves as, you can't ask for help?
Yeah, I think one of the stats that was really interesting in one of the Gen Z articles was saying narcissism is down. And I was
Ah.
like, oh, I didn't know narcissism was up. But apparently, um, I'm Gen X and Gen Y and boomers and the silent generation were much more self focused. And what that means sometimes is around the same thing as what you were saying about where you go for guideposts for success and happiness are shifting,
Hmm.
right? And where that's the same, so where customers or and customers are consumers and even clinicians of any products or service, how what success looks like is shifting. And I think some categories, some industries are moving just more quickly than others. So it's not a shock that consumer packaged goods are already there, right?
Yep.
They know that they have to satisfy that. They know, if you saw, and let's say cause du jour, because I don't want to alienate anyone, but let's just say any movement, any current event, many companies where you'd see every company you've ever heard of with an email or a company page that talked about their commitment or their position on that issue, right?
Hmm.
That,
Yep.
like the sneakers and the chapsticks and the, you know what I mean, the cars, like whatever you were selling,
Had
all of
some
a sudden
issue.
you're seeing companies position on these things. That didn't happen
Mm.
years ago. It didn't matter. So I think that the financial services industry started looking at money in a different way and customers in a different way, in terms of micro lending starts coming up. So they're just looking at who is a customer and what does it mean differently. And I think that the life sciences on the med tech side is going there. And then the old school, if you will, sorry, but payers and biotech and pharma, who were more tied to their core business model
Yep.
around discovery of new therapies and putting them into the marketplace. That's why I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But again, they're our friends. We need them because we need to help each other out. They have resources, they have access to individuals, to lives, to data, to
Yep.
study, to safety protocols. And we have the innovative tools to help make those relationships better.
Okay. When you say that for the partners, that's the to help and get support. That's the rising tides rises all boats. Uh huh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It goes full circle then.
I hope.
Well, yeah. Well,
I'm still hopeful. Maybe if we reconnect in a year's time, we'll see. But right
wow.
now, I'm smiling and hopeful, because that's all we can be, right? But I feel like these young people are really asking some of the questions that I think are, as a society, we've all been afraid to ask, asking of themselves and of others. Who are you? What do you stand for? What do you want? Um, is what you are and who you are the same for me and for you and for you and for you? And how can we help each other all be better? And that, it sounds really hippie-ish, but I mean it's a really beautiful, basic, primal human thing. And I think that's what's really amazing to me about these young people coming from all walks of life and having a very similar platform that they start with, which is that. And I thought, wow, adults could really learn from this,
Yeah, yeah,
you know. And I noticed that even on LinkedIn. I mean, look at how LinkedIn feeds were just a couple years ago to now. Now you see personal stories, CEOs and presidents of companies sharing a picture of a child at a desk saying, "My son is home working next to me today." And I was like, wow, they're really sharing
yeah,
their personal stuff, or
yeah,
sharing a health diagnosis on LinkedIn with thousands of random people, and just being vulnerable and also asking for help and support of causes that they believe in. And
yes,
so you see the shift everywhere,
yeah.
obviously, but I think that the young people, for them, it's just that's normal to them. That's where they're starting.
Yeah, I have to say that I've seen those personal posts, and I did see at a time there's like a stage of it was all like corporate and no feeling emotion, and then it became a little bit, and then there's posts people will comment and say this is not Facebook, and now I see no one saying that anymore. This is not Facebook, and now it is some personal stories, and this is now we're humans
Yeah.
again. This is good. Yeah, no, very good. But it's taken took some time, and it's the usual. There's a video that it's about a guy dancing on. You might have seen it. They use it a lot in about, I don't know if it's psychology or group theory. There's a guy dancing on his own on a hillside at a festival, and he's dancing crazily. You know, he's having a lot of fun, and everyone's standing looking at him, going, "Look at this guy!" And next thing you know, the whole hill is dancing. It took one person, and then it's just like LinkedIn. It took a couple of people, and now, hey, we're all humans again. So hopefully, yes, I'm hopeful. Um, so how far away? If you've just come in an incubator, you've got your product out there. Um, you must be pretty close to scaling, and now have America covered. Then you'll be off to the rest of the world. Then,
Yeah, we actually have some cool partnerships. Just launching two. Wound up through one of our advisors connecting with the Romanian robotics team. They are world champions and pretty exciting,
oh
pretty smart
wow,
group of young people who are going to be part of our beta testing group. We have basically pilots all over the world with small groups that we're trying to. The app right now currently for Evermore is in English only, so you have to be
English
can be
speaking.
ESL,
Uh
but
huh.
English speaker. Um, but yeah, we're looking at global and cultural, to make sure that everything resonates and see how we do that, and having adoption and growth and enhancement around the globe, because that's the goal, to help everyone everywhere. And if we can't, that someone else can. And then that's that side of the business. And then with new solutions, we're trying to work with corporations to do similar things, whether they have their own tools. The tools and the services are just mechanisms of
Mechanisms.
action,
Yep.
right? Ultimately, it's the mindset,
Yep.
and then, quite frankly, the funding that is aligned to actually affecting change.
Okay, yeah, you said a key word there about the mindset. It's a big thing on the mindset. I see that with these transformation projects when they say we're agile, and they say that in really name only, but their behavior, the way they think, is still how they've always done it. And it's not. Yeah, the mindset needs to change first, and then everything else will follow.
Right, right. Or just, acronym bingo for acronym sake, or buzzword bingo, right? So it's, maybe the words I use aren't as eloquent, but, it's there's a true benefit when you can make someone's life just a little easier or a little better.
Yep.
And there is enough wealth, data, tools, science to help do that for people. We just have to sometimes help put it together in a different way.
Yeah, package it and get the right messaging so it resonates, as you said earlier, and not like over the head, and basically will sound like white. The TV when you turn it on in the morning and you get the white noise, which yeah, I have some friends I studied with, and they said this is what they listen to when they study. It blocks out everything, and I said, how can you? I listen to classical music. That there's just annoying, but each to their own, right?
Right, right.
Okay, so let's shall we wrap it up there? That's been great conversation. I want to summarize what we've just covered. There's a lot that we covered there, and it's been a learning curve for me. I didn't understand the issues about the mental health that the children have, and why is that an issue? Well, the children to me, although on this camera here I might look like a child myself, but no. Um, so there is a issue around mental health with Generation Z. Um, for those that don't know, it's all fun and games at the moment when we've got our phones in front of us. But for the kids, this generation is that they've never known anything else but. So they are and bombarded with information at all the time. Like I think this older generation would know, have a certain perspective or view on media, and they'll know that media and certain media outlets have a certain perspective that they like to push. But if you weren't aware of it, you'd understand that this is a particular message that they like to push that may not be reality. But when kids have got their mobile devices and they think this is the reality, this is their life, and if they don't match up to themselves, then there's something wrong with them. And then that leads to other issues of depression, anxiety, and as you're saying about the number of incidences of the stats of either suicide, mental hospital admissions, everything is up for them, 20, 30, 40%. So this is a big issue. But why should we care? We should care because it is a massive demographic. It is comparable to, if it's 65 to 70 million people in the States, and what is the States? So 340 million people. So
Yeah, it's like 2 billion in globally
yeah,
with Gen Z.
that's a big number, so yeah, we need to pay attention because they are our future, the future of the world.
And they're going to be taking care of us. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, so yeah, that is a big thing. Yeah, so we should look after them now so that we can say, hey, remember that time? But also they are more, let's say, personally aware of their wants and needs. So throwing things at them or tools and techniques that don't resonate, forget about it. So you need to pay attention. Why do you need to pay attention? Is because they have two sources of revenue or income, but they have their own earning ability, which they're about to start if they haven't or started already. But also, they are the grandchildren or even great grandchildren of the baby boomers, who the baby boomers either retiring or leaving them inheritance that they will inherit a lot of money, and so therefore spending power. So, in terms of investors, then this is the opportunity to pay attention. They will be bigger and stronger as they get older. If you miss the boat now, you've missed the boat forever. So it's pulled out and it's sailing. So forget about that. Or like the train has left the station. So sorry, you've missed the station. Yeah. So there are tools and techniques. Natanya has one out in the market right now and growing. So what is the website that we can? It's not the spelling is a bit unusual, isn't it?
Oh yeah, sorry. So I'll spell it's EVRMORE.io. Evermore.
.io, the classic IO startup domain. So EVOMORE, so more, evermore .io.
EVRMORE. Yep.
Okay, and that'll be in the show notes anyway. So as well as your LinkedIn details that people can find you, get in touch with you. There's partnership opportunities there. You're looking for sponsors, so this is a great initiative. You've got the CEOs that comes is very passionate, probably like me, that doesn't get no sleep because you love what you do. Okay, so what did I miss anything there? I think the quote that I'm
No,
gonna.
I just thank you for this. Is a really great opportunity. It's really. I spent a long time in my career not revealing anything personal about myself because I thought you're not supposed to, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really refreshing time to be able to lean into what you care about and
Mm,
to try and actually build up others and yourself in the process with your understanding and awareness. So I thank you for this forum to do that. And, ultimately there's a lot of heavy lifting on the biz dev side and on the biz building side.
yeah.
So there's a lot there's a lot within your communities and your groups that we can't do this alone. We need, we need every level of everything,
Oh
from
yes.
development, financial planning to commercialization expertise. So it's always good to share outside of your comfort zone. And, I'm really glad I pushed out of mine And I thank you for this
Oh, my
opportunity.
pleasure. No, thank you for your time and thank you for your advice, and the knowledge that you imparted. And for the listeners now they know something about the Generation Z that, well, one, I didn't know before. So I think we've got to pay a little bit more attention because, yeah, they are, like Michael Jackson has a song about the youth. They are the future. So we've got to look after them. And yeah, they're a special group of people. They're not like us. They were born in technology. They're a bit more sensitive, but they know what they want. So, pay attention. Okay, Natanya, thank you
Great.
very much. We'll wrap it up there. Enjoy your evening. Thank you again for the time.